Of course, they saw the transformation. Why would they choose not to question it? I never really prepared for them questioning my abilities after the fight. It might seem normal to me, but it's truly far from normal. Various thoughts were running through Ryuk's mind as he stared at the half-fallen one. Yet, his gaze was as straight as ever, containing the same naivety and his usual poker expression. There is a hint of dark energy in your transformation. Dark energy is a secretive energy, and all you need to know is that it encroaches upon apex energy, which most of the races use. Only the Nulls are well-known users of dark energy, and they're the reason why they're so overwhelmingly powerful, along with a few other known interdimensional races. But even though your transformation no doubt bears a hint of this dark energy, some others think you might have come from a dark church. After I showed them proof of your existence, they had no choice but to swallow it up. And also, the majority of them were only sore because of Ignatius losing. They wanted to defend their own by trying to tear apart your name, something the Grand Elders recognized, so they dismissed your case. The half-fallen one explained as Ryuk unconsciously heaved out loud. But I can trust you, can't I, Ryuk? That you're really one of us. The half-fallen one stepped forward toward Ryuk, who didn't move an inch backward. You can't really be siding with dark powers, can you? You can't be a secret messenger for the Nulls, can you? She asked, as Ryuk looked into her burning silvery eyes. He could feel the gravity in the area suddenly rising tenfold, the air itself crawling with an intense chill as if time had stopped. A secret messenger for the Nulls, huh? Ryuk mused, intense disdain and mockery oozing from his voice as his eyes became steely. The most precious thing I possess in the world was taken away from me by a Null. And now you, along with your council of fallen elders, wonder if I'm only a messenger of one. Ryuk asked sarcastically. As the crimson color of his right eye began burning with a fiery glow. Edge this into your memories, half-fallen one. You'll never find an entity whose heart burns with hatred for the Nulls more than mine. That you can at least be sure of, even if the earth rends and the sky begins falling. My hatred for the Nulls will be enough to hold them all in place. And I will never rest until, at the very least, the Null that took the life of one dear to me is erased from this world. This I swear to the one I love the most in my heart. The half-fallen one paused in her tracks, every single one of Ryuk's words echoing in her head. So much hatred, she thought in shock, as the world around her changed in its color. In a world where everything seemed golden, a dark aura containing an intense amount of bloodlust covered Ryuk's figure completely, burning like flames around him. There is no doubt about his hatred for the Nulls. If so, then we all might have been worried for nothing, she thought as the sight of the world returned to normal. Slowly, she turned back and walked away from the balcony. Your answer is satisfying. You will be leaving with Morgaine tomorrow at the earliest sight of dawn. Good night, Ryuk. The half-fallen one called, soon fading away from Ryuk's gaze as he stared at her disappearing silhouette before turning back to look at the horizon before him. Host handled that quite nicely. The system notification flashed as Ryuk exhaled loudly. Her own words about me being a messenger helped. If she had outright asked, "You can't be a Null, can you?" I would have displayed my doubt, and under her hawk eyes, I'm sure she would have seen that faint doubt. Who knows where that would have ended me? But she has seen my hatred, and that is truly genuine. For now, my identity is safe at least. The dark energy they sense from my transformation isn't that of a Null but that of the Anunnaki, which my nanobody was built after. But if they all start suspecting that I'm a Null or at least have an association with one, it's only a matter of time before my true race is revealed. And I have no doubt that I will be killed on the spot without any trial whatsoever. But I'm not sure all of the elders have truly dropped the matter. Some of them might have their interest piqued and still be suspecting me. For now, I can't use any of my nanobody power at all for fear of being discovered. One day, no doubt, my identity as a Null will be revealed, but I can't afford for that to be now when I'm so powerless. Strength. I really need strength, he muttered, as he shifted his attention, perching on one of the thoughts that arrested his attention the most. Interdimensional gates and entities, huh? Ryuk mused, remembering the words used by the half-fallen one. Surprisingly, he felt a connection. Uncle Bob had already told me in my evolution holograph of him, having passed through thousands of worlds before he finally chose to rest on Endearth. Could these interdimensional creatures really just be the inhabitants of different other planets? So many races, so many planets, so many levels of power. Just what is there in the farthest depth of this universe? Just how long will my hatred take me? Those were Ryuk's last thoughts as he slowly fell onto his back on the golden tiles, his eyes drifting closed. For the night, he had chosen to sleep on the balcony instead of returning to his room. The next morning came, almost quicker than lightning, to a total of 10 individuals in the Eclipse Citadel. Ryuk's crimson-blue eyes opened to the sight of a person standing over him. Wakey, wakey, sleepyhead. The front building of the half-fallen one castle seemed to be livelier as various guards were arranged in the large compound, spears in hand, and knees bowed to the ground, all facing two individuals who were at the center of attention. Both were women, locked in a very deep hug. Standing a few meters behind them was none other than Ryuk, with a travel bag in hand. "I'll always be waiting for your return, Morgane," the half-fallen one whispered into her ears, a hint of sadness in her voice. Her daughter was finally leaving her watchful eyes. The world out there was cold and harsh, and this might very well be the last time she would see her daughter again. "I'll be back soon, Mom. I promise," Morgane said as they slowly backed up. But then Morgane felt herself pulled deeper into her mother's soft embrace, as the half-fallen one placed her lips close to her ears. "And if you want to pick your first guy to crush on, make sure he's a dickhead. Okay?" she said, causing Morgane's face to grow red as she yanked backward before roaring out loud. "Mom! Hey hey hey!" The half-fallen one giggled, ignoring Morgane's fuming, before arriving before Ryuk, who could only give a solid nod. But then surprise clouded his face when he was pulled into an embrace. "You'll live, won't you, Ryuk?" she asked. "I definitely will. Then watch Morgane for me, will you?" she requested as Ryuk stared at Morgane, who was strangely redder than usual. "I'll try my best." "Good," she said, releasing him from her hug. Vroom, vroom. Suddenly, the sound of loud horns could be heard as they all turned their attention toward the gate and found a large bus parking. It was a combination of silver and dark, bearing the symbol of crossed wings with swords running through the middle. Immediately, Ryuk recognized it as being from the fallen Arisen Hall. It was finally time. "We await your return, young mistress." The voices of the hundreds of soldiers echoed simultaneously as they slammed their spears on the ground. With one last wave from Morgane and a nod from Ryuk, both of them disappeared into the bus, which soon continued into the distance. Ryuk's eyes lingered on the large castle for one last time as it slowly disappeared further and further until it was no longer visible. "Welcome, Ryuk and Morgane Damanri. We'll now be heading back to the Arisen Hall, where a plane to the academy is already waiting." A voice rang out. Ryuk turned his attention to the small hole in the bus and saw two fallen drivers, one of them holding a communicator and seemingly the one speaking. He could only nod to the information as he turned his attention to Morgane, finding her eyes glued to the window, watching the buildings streak by with speed. She seemed to prefer the silence, her usual excited and aggressive aura slightly fading away. Ryuk didn't disturb her as he collapsed onto his back, heaving a little. "It's finally happening, isn't it? I'm on my way now, old Jack. I'm on my way to the Ascension Academy," Ryuk thought as a smile unknowingly tugged at the corner of his lips. But then a harumph came. "What is so funny, you dickhead?" Morgane's voice rang out, causing Ryuk's happiness to pause mid-step as he slowly opened one of his eyes. "Can't I smile again, Morgane? I don't have to be sober just because you are, you know," Ryuk stated in a sarcastic tone, causing Morgane to huff. "I'm not sober, you dickhead." "Good. At least the Morgane I know is still there," he replied, making Morgane pause in her tracks before a big smile appeared on her face. "Of course I am," she said, as Ryuk opened his second eye and then pointed. You have a teardrop running down your left eye, though. You dickhead, I don't. Hehehe. A little more than 10 minutes later, the bus zoomed into the fallen Arisen Hall gate before coming to a stop right before the large Colosseum structure. Instantly, Ryuk and Morgane got down from the bus, and he couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as they stood before the Colosseum. I thought we ought to be before a port, he thought to himself as Morgane stepped through the Colosseum's gate and he followed after. Immediately after they entered, they found a total of 8 people already sitting in the area, none other than the true Ultima 10, who had somehow arrived before them. Ryuk simply moved to the seats he and Quinn had used, far behind, and silently waited. It didn't take long before an energy wave suddenly appeared in the sky above the Colosseum. Turning his head up, Ryuk found a dark-feathered fallen man standing in the air. He was none other than Sir Kieran, Ryuk's class teacher. Welcome, everyone, back to the Arisen Hall, Sir Kieran said as the large arena of the Colosseum suddenly began sinking in. From the darkness and gloom below, a jet-black ship carrying the emblem of the stabbed, folded wing rose, carried by the platform until it stood fully in the arena. Well then, without wasting any more time, let's get going, shall we? Sir Kieran said, floating down toward the huge plane as its hatch opened up, releasing a huge amount of white gas into the stadium. Without wasting any more time, the students grabbed their bags and followed after him, climbing up the stairs as the plane's hatch soon shut back up. Immediately, whirring sounds filled the entire Colosseum air as the plane began rising slowly into the sky. Once it hovered above the Colosseum, it shot forward with speed, becoming a blazing light that disappeared rapidly into the distance, sonic booms erupting through the sky from its inhumane speed. The Ascension Academy, as most would love to believe or are told, is in Grade B, no? The voice rang through the mini living room space, where sofas were arranged in a circular format. The true 10 Ultima geniuses were taking their seats, and at the center stood none other than Sir Kieran, an astral holograph projected in front of his face. But the Ascension Academy is actually not located in Grade B. You all might see the little Academy space stationed in Grade B, but that isn't the true Ascension Academy. That is just where they conduct mini-tests and experiments, serving as a connection point to Grade B. They have these bases all over the city grades. The true Ascension Academy is actually located in Grade A, Sir Kieran declared, causing some of the students to gasp in shock. Grade A? That was the most secretive grade where almost no geniuses knew a single thing about it, only that it was the best of the best city grades. This plane is currently moving at a speed of Mach 10, and for that reason, it should take us at least 10 hours to arrive at the Academy airspace. That's almost a half-day journey. And hopefully we don't face any complications from flying beasts along the way, Sir Kieran completed in his thoughts. There are a total of 10 rooms around this place, and each of you can choose one to stay in for the next 10 hours. It has everything you'll need temporarily. And a personal piece of advice from me. If possible, try and make a friend amongst yourself. You all could be faced with another test the second you arrive at the Academy, or find yourselves in a situation where it is you 10 against the remaining 10 geniuses from other families. It will do you all good if you're well aware of your abilities and potential, and not irked by each other's presence. The other family geniuses will use that against you. And speaking of being irked by others' presence, I'm speaking of you, Darius and Alaric, Sir Kieran stated, his gaze thinning as the eerie geniuses turned to look at 2 others. One of them was a genius with long dark hair and a weird blade mark coursing down his left eye, making him look scary, even though he seemed to be quite a handsome guy, if not for the scar. He was Darius Crescent, and to Ryuk, he was the one who had carved up Quinn. The other guy had silver hair, a cold aura surrounding his body, and his expression was as frosty as ice. He was none other than Alaric Frostshard, the one Ryuk remembered Quinn had described as being able to control ice just like himself. Who? Darius's thick voice echoed through the room as he raised an eyebrow at Sir Kieran, while Alaric's expression didn't change at all. Both of you, throughout the entire duration of the test, have never been noticed associating with another person in a normal way. One of you never even talked to a single genius for 6 months straight, while the other finds joy in performing wicked deeds. You must remember to throw this attitude away and get to know at least one person. It will be you against the other family geniuses. You cannot come across as divided. You'll all be getting to know each other. Do you understand? Sir Kierna said, as the students merely forced out a faint from their noses. This service is in the name of the devilish fallen family. Now, do you all understand? Yes, sir, they all said at the same time. Even Alaric opened his frosty lips and gave a yes in reply. To the weird scene of the students who weren't interested suddenly becoming enthusiastic, Ryuk raised an eyebrow. When simply ordered, they simply forced out half-hearted yes. But once the name of the fallen family was added, their entire demeanor immediately changed, and they suddenly became filled with life. So, this is what loyalty to the fallen family looks like. Ryuk silently thought to himself as Sir Kierna gave a good-natured nod before leaving the room. Now it was just the 10 students left together, and the one who received the most attention was none other than Ryuk. The entire fallen genius group, except for Morgaine, bore threatening gazes into him, and Ryuk could swear if gazes were knives, he would have been diced to pieces. You who? The loud, echoing voice broke through the deadly stares as all the geniuses turned their heads to the side, where a lanky-looking fallen boy with short silver hair could be seen. He arrested Ryuk's attention due to the most eye-catching thing about him, which was none other than the blindfold over his eyes. It's you again, Aerith. The one who spoke out was none other than Darius in his thick, scary voice as the blindfolded boy turned his attention to him. Oh, Darius, my good friend. How's life been hitting you? Hard or fairly hard? I'm not your friend, you bastard. And life will be hitting you pretty hard soon. Once I get my hands on you. Darius spat out in anger, while the other couldn't help but giggle loudly. It seemed both of them had a little skirmish every now and then. Well then, good luck in being able to catch me. Since we have all been necessitated to introduce ourselves with the fallen name, then I will be the first. As you all know, I am none other than the sovereignty named Aerith Selim from the lost and most powerful family of the Midnight Spires. Our godly and unrivaled ability is our teleportation and, hold it there, the Midnight Spires is not the most powerful lost family. A genius instantly interrupted Aerith's grand motion, huffing. More like the hardest to catch family. Another genius bit in, causing Aerith's expression to drop. Ryuk watched as Aerith suddenly faded away from his seat, and in the next instant, he stood before the genius who made the hard-to-catch comment. And what about you, Ariel? Your damn shadow family, even with your weird-ass shadow abilities, you still can't catch me? Huh. So shut up and don't interrupt my grand introduction, you four-eyed schmuck. If I was a four-eyed schmuck, then I would be putting on a blindfold like you idiot. Ariel cursed back as he furiously kicked at Aerith, but his kick met with nothing but thin air as Aerith reappeared once more, and he was onto his seat once more. TCH, you bullies? The young man warmed up his throat. Hello, everyone. I am Ariel Nightshade of the Nightshade family, one of the top 3 most powerful lost families, known for their ability to control shadows and move at unbelievable speeds. TCH, unbelievable speed my ass. Aerith's voice came in at the right time, as a thick vein pulsed on Ariel's forehead. But he didn't have time to respond, when a tiny voice interrupted. The 3rd most powerful lost family is my family, the Iron Might family. When Ryuk turned his attention toward the speaker, his jaw dropped. The boy was an incredibly fat fallen genius. Yet even though he was fat, thick veins bulged all over his arms, making him look incredibly strong. But his voice, it was the absolute opposite of his body, sounding like that of a girl who had never stepped foot out of her house, so incredibly tiny to the ear. I am Garrick Might of the Iron Might family, the boy introduced, and the entire fallen genius crowd couldn't help but burst out laughing due to his tiny voice. From the mighty Iron Might family, and you all just have to be blessed with such a sweet-sounding female tone. How jealous I am. Darius's sarcastic voice rang out as intense smoke burst out of Garrick's nose when he turned his attention to him. "Wanna go for another beating, Darius? Nah, I'll save myself the stress. Cutting up a fast piece of slab meat like yours takes too much energy and makes my blades dull. Simply not worth it." Darius responded with a sadistic grin as Garrick could only fume. "Coward! You bastard! I'll grind you into 100 pieces right now." "Hell!" A gentle voice suddenly rang out through the room as everyone paused in their motion and turned to look at the silvery ice figure. "I'm Aller," the cold-looking young man said before sitting down, as the geniuses all had the light in their eyes dimmed. "At least complete your words, you cold-looking thing," a female genius said before continuing. "And anyway, I am Silva Thorn of the Verdant Thorn family, and I also possess the abilities to heal. So don't hesitate to bring me your injuries. Okay?" The golden-haired girl said with a beaming smile, the only one who seemed to have a lively aura in the room. Crackle. Suddenly, the powerful sound of lightning roared through the entire space, as they all turned their attention to a dark-haired boy standing with sparks of light dancing between his fingers. "My lightning always attracts so much attention. I must be invincible." The boy sighed with a weird, invincible soldier melancholy. "Your lightning won't do shit to me, Thaddeus Thunderclap." A mocking voice rang out as Thaddeus's eyebrows quivered, and he turned his attention to a golden-haired boy sitting grandly on the sofa, with legs crossed over the other. "And where in hell must you have come from?" Thaddeus asked with a raised eyebrow as the boy humphed. "I am Adriel Shadowheart of the—" "Aren't you that guy who can summon those chains that bind tighter the more your opponent struggles?" Thaddeus cut back before he could finish, as Adriel's face filled with irritation. "And you think my lightning can't do shit to you? Your chains are metal. You idiot. You'll be the most unlucky opponent to cross me," Thaddeus said with a smirk, ignoring the boy who could only fume. "I am Lucinda Crimson of the Crimson Veil family, also known by others as the Vampire Fallen family." A genius butted in before the dark-haired girl could complete her words, and she couldn't help but turn her irritated eyebrows to him. "Don't interrupt me. We already know what you can do. Play around with your blood. That's all. On the contrary, everyone, I am a special fallen starlight known as Orion Nightslick. With such a slick neck, I can't argue otherwise," Lucinda said as Orion had an annoyed look grow on his forehead. And truly, Ryuk couldn't help but chuckle a bit as he saw the young man's neck longer than normal. "Tsh, you've ruined it," Orion said, sitting back down in his seat, and the geniuses could only turn their attention to the remaining two who had yet to give their announcement. "You all must be sick in the head if you don't know who I am." Morgane's blank and uninterested voice rang out, shocking the geniuses speechless as she went back to playing around with her device without a care in the world. As expected of the boyish princess of the eclipsed citadel, some of the geniuses muttered under their breath, and Ryuk couldn't help but notice they all seemed to be a little fearful and respectful of Morgane, perhaps because of her background, which they all now seemed to know. Now the attention was on the last person, who was none other than Ryuk himself. "We already know you're a human, so you can skip through that." The sound rang out, and Ryuk winced as in his ears was Aerith, the teleporting guy, suddenly sitting beside him before he could even blink. "I am Ryuk," Ryuk stated before sitting down. "I have 1,000 questions for you, pretty boy." Darius's thick voice boomed as he walked toward Ryuk and crouched before him, his hands grabbing Ryuk's left hand and looking at it suspiciously. "This hand of yours was what became that long scythe, no? I was wondering if your blades or my scythe are sharper," Darius said with an evil smirk, a flame of competition burning in his eyes. "Well, I'm pretty sure we'll be finding out about that soon in the academy," he replied as Darius smirked. "At least you know. And you also showed an ice ability when you battled Ignatius. Is ice your main element?" Another genius, the one called Ariel, asked curiously as Ryuk nodded while raising his hands, and an ice dagger appeared. Alaric's eyes couldn't help but flash with interest, something that rarely happened. Oh, he's an ice controller, huh, just like me. Now this is a bit interesting. And at the last second, a giant white-colored anaconda appeared behind you. What is that about? Another genius asked, and before Ryuk could answer, another question came in, and another, until everyone was blaring questions here and there, and soon it was all Ryuk could hear. How did I get myself into this situation? They seem to be getting along quite well, don't they? Sir Kierna's voice echoed in the pilot room as a chuckle rang out before the reply came. Yeah, they really are. It was from none other than a golden-haired lady who looked at the TV-like projection that revealed the students, all currently introducing each other. Of course, one could hear their words, and it was quite the lovingly chaotic scene. They'll need to get along if they wish to survive in the Ascension Academy, the lady voiced on a more serious and worried note as Sir Kierna brought out a dark grimoire-like book and began reading. They don't realize that yet, which is why they aren't taking it seriously. But they very well would understand when they get into the Ascension Academy. You don't have to worry about them, Sir Kierna said as the lady looked at the TV and then found herself raising an eyebrow before chuckling. And what do you think of the human, Kierna? She suddenly asked. He seems to be getting along quite well with those prideful geniuses, she completed as Sir Kierna raised his head and stared intently at Ryuk on the TV, his pitch-black eyes rotating within his eyeballs. Phenomenal, Sir Kierna replied. Phenomenal? The Lady Dora asked as Sir Kierna resettled his spectacles on his face. He truly is a phenomenal genius. I have seen how he has risen from his lowest, how he has surpassed every other genius in his class, how hard he has trained every night in the training room and special cultivation. I have always been watching you, Ryuk, Sir Kierna thought to himself. He is very difficult to find out. But the Ascension Academy will soon find out what his capabilities are, he added. Hopefully. I personally like his cuteness. Hee, Dora said, giggling like a little baby as she looked at Ryuk, who was getting thrown questions left and right, all the geniuses soon forming a circle around him. It was a miracle how he was able to keep them all at bay. Sir Kierna watched Dora's fawning expression as he turned once more to Ryuk, but he didn't share the same sentiment. I can't see any cuteness in him. All I see is a monster egg slowly hatching. Whoo? A loud exhale rang through the room as Ryuk collapsed onto the bed, heaving a huge sigh of relief. I'm finally free, he thought to himself as he straightened his back before fully landing on the bed. The genius's questions had been unending, but he had smartly replied to their inquiries, using all the tactics he knew and not revealing too much. But to reveal absolutely nothing wouldn't satisfy the geniuses, so he had to at least give a little bit of explanation that fulfilled their curiosity, even if it didn't satisfy them completely. They also had secrets which they were keeping from each other, so they at least understood not to over-question Ryuk or scrutinize his answers. Through that, he had been able to wriggle out a room for himself and land in it. Still, I would have to say the geniuses themselves are not bad. They all possess their own bits of arrogance, but they're all geniuses in the first place, and that's a thing I've begun noticing about geniuses now. I'll eventually get used to their arrogance soon, and if that's taken away, one would find quite the good personalities underneath. Ryuk stated to himself before pushing the thought to the back of his mind. Activate stats. Stats. Strength. 130. Agility. 130. Endurance. 130. Intelligence. 130. Charisma. 50. Mana. 110. Attribute points. 31. Finally, my mana points moved, and somehow I can sense that isn't the limit yet. With serious cultivation, I can vastly increase it. Now that my mana abilities have increased, I would need an equally large amount of mana to bring out their true powers and abilities. Ryuk mused as he began making his choice. I've put a hold on buying a cultivation manual because I knew my mana wouldn't increase anyway. But now that I've broken through, there's no better time to buy a cultivation manual than now. Activate shops, Ryuk said as the shop interface appeared before him, and he ignored all the rest of the information, quickly arriving at the cultivation manuals. The most powerful one right now was the one Ryuk wanted. Advanced Techniques. 1. Primordial Frost Scripture. Description. A legendary technique said to tap into the deepest layers of apex energy of the present reality, granting the user unparalleled control over ice-based powers and vastly improving ice-based cultivation speed by hundreds of times beyond normal capabilities. Cost, 10,000 points. Benefits. Allows the user to generate ice apex energy even in the absence of ice or cold. Unlocks a new devastating skill, Cryocataclysm, a large-scale explosion capable of freezing entire battlefields. Grants a passive ability, Frozen Physique. User's body becomes immune to frost damage and gains an ethereal frost-imbued aura. Limitations. Overuse risks severe backlash, including potential harm to contracted beasts. Purchase the Primordial Frost Scripture. Ryuk ordered. Does host really choose to exchange 10,000 purchase points for this technique? The system's auto-confirmation came in, but Ryuk replied almost instantly. Yes, I would. 10,000 purchase points. Congratulations. Host has bought the new skill, Primordial Frost Scripture. Finally. Buying this skill allows me to not only boost my cultivation speed, but also get 2 extra ice skills that can come in handy in the future. Absolutely worth it. He thought to himself as he walked to the door of his room and locked it tight before asking, Hey system, can you sense any spying artifacts like cameras around the room? Ryuk asked just to make sure. No, host. Good. Ryuk mused as he moved to the side of his bedroom, and spreading his hands out, a gigantic book soon landed on his palms, so heavy it pushed Ryuk's hand down to the bed. So big? He asked in shock as he looked at the book before a grin opened up on his lips as he witnessed an intense chilling cold begin climbing up his hands from the chilling aura surrounding the book. Truly, this is the real deal. Nice, Ryuk was saying as his hands reached the edge of the book to open it up, when suddenly his eyes narrowed as he looked at his own hands and found all of his hair standing straight. What the? Boom! In the next instant, the room rotated around in a circular format as Ryuk was thrown off balance, slamming his head straight into the side of the room, which kept revolving until it finally came to a stop. Ryuk fell back from the ceiling, managing to land on his legs as he lay crouched. Immediately, the light in the room blared with a red hue that began flashing as Ryuk's expression contorted. A loud announcement rang through the room. Warning! We're under attack from aerial mutated beasts. Every genius is to move to the pilot training room now. Immediately, Ryuk grabbed the book that had fallen by his side, returned it to the shop, and instantly headed out. Stepping outside, he was met with the other geniuses who were also leaving their rooms and heading towards the pilot room when, boom! Another incredibly violent explosion sounded from underneath as all the geniuses were thrown off their feet, slamming straight into the wall. Hey! Watch it! Ryuk yelled when a large body slammed into him, pinning him against the wall like paste, almost covering it up, and it was none other than Garrick, the incredibly fat guy. The plane once more stabilized, and this time, the geniuses all immediately rushed to the pilot training room. But when they opened the door, they didn't see any pilot room. Instead, they saw a smooth white room, which instantly locked up as the gate disappeared, trapping all the students inside. You all are safe now. This is a pocket space, present in the plane, and not affected by turbulence from the plane. Here you'll remain until you're given further orders. The voice echoed once more. The geniuses dumbly looked at each other, but just as they were about to complain, a holograph suddenly appeared, showing the plane from a third-angle perspective, making everything happening outside clear. Wait, is that a calamitous crow? Alaric, the cold guy, completed the sentence with a small shake to his cold voice. The calamitous crow. Wait, isn't that one of the beasts born at the plane of Dominion? We're screwed, Aerith said, his face soaking in sweat. But they all quieted down when they sighted a fallen figure soon appearing on top of the plane, facing the gigantic beast horde flying towards them. A few minutes earlier. Hey Kieran, I'm sensing a strange wave approaching us. The voice of Doria rang out as Sir Kieran calmly opened to the second page of the book. Just use the ship's eradicating missiles and blast it to pieces, Sir Kieran stated without a care in the world as Doria moved towards a red button at the side but then halted. She rapidly typed on the keyboard before her, and her eyes widened in shock when she finally got the image of whatever swarm of dark objects was approaching them. "Hey, Kieran. What again? Is that?" she asked before pausing as Sir Kieran slowly turned his head, finding the holographic image where the live view of some creatures could be seen flying towards them. His cold black eyes flashed in a bit of surprise. "Tsh, just what I feared. A calamitous crow horde. But such a powerful beast roaming around this area? So unlike them. Are the beasts starting to awaken from their slumber too?" Doria asked, her hands rapidly typing on the keyboard and sending scans to ascertain the surrounding waves far from the area to confirm her curiosity. But her hand was stopped. "Send the geniuses to the safe room. We can't afford an injury on them before they arrive at the academy," he ordered, his voice shifting from his usual uncaring tone to a more serious note. Then he headed outside, but stopped at Doria's words. "Hey, Kieran, you sure you want to face them directly? There's only you, and there's a horde of beasts at the peak of the Dominion Plain. We can slowly wear them down with the ship's defensive mechanisms before we engage in battle. Are you sure you'll be fine?" "I'll be fine, Doria, as long as none of the geniuses suffer an injury before we arrive at the Ascension Academy. If they do, I'll get sliced to pieces by the half-fallen one. So send the geniuses to the safe room. Boom! Now!" he said before fading away from the room. A few seconds later and Sir Kieran appeared at the top of the plane. The intense sonic booms from the plane's crazy speed of Mach 8 were more than enough to send any of the geniuses blown to bits from the intense friction. But Kieran stood there, absolutely unbothered, as his hands slowly reached for his spectacles, taking them off, and walking on the plane until he arrived at the lips of it. His pitch-black eyes scanned the far distance where he saw thousands of 2-meter-span crows flying towards them, with energy vortexes brimming in their beaks and sharp dark claws dangling below their feet, capable of ripping apart pure steel. Behind the horde stood another otherworldly 5-meter-span raven, which flew slower than the others. Around it, space was literally shattering to pieces like glass form its wing movement, only to get mended a few seconds later. "Nice! A cataclysm-grade horde of beasts," Sir Kieran said excitedly as he stretched out his hand where light bloomed, and a gigantic dark grimoire appeared in his left hand. Its pages began flipping and opened to a middle page. Immediately, one would see the hilt of a sword, which Sir Kieran slowly took out, revealing a chillingly long 3-meter-length dark katana that burst out with fallen dark flames. "Now, let's see how rusty my skills have gotten," Sir Kieran said as a pillar of dark energy burst out formed the beaks of Tay about 1,000 crows, resulting in thousands of pillars brimming with unmatched power shooting towards the plane. Calmly, Sir Kieran jerked his right hand holding the katana backward, and then he slashed forward horizontally. Fallen vortex slash. As the dark katana slashed through the air, an eerie stillness followed, a dreadful silence that seemed to crush reality itself. The space before Sir Kieran's sword quivered like a fragile glass pane under pressure, black veins suddenly spiraling from the slash's origin, rapidly spreading outward toward the beam of exploding dark energy waves, swimming toward the ship. And when they finally met, shatter, the fabric of reality gave way, fracturing into a domain of crystalline cracks. Shards of shimmering nothingness spiraled outward, as a gaping void beyond, an abyss that seemed to hunger for existence itself, pulled in all the approaching dark pillar beams, swallowing them completely, before the cracks quickly mended themselves. In little less than an instant, all the approaching beams of dark pillar energy, which seemed more than sure to blow the ship apart into nothingness, were instantly swallowed up by the gaping vortex formed from Sir Kieran's slash. But the calamitous crow horde weren't phased as they flew forward faster, their beaks opening, and another piece of energy beam gathering. However, Sir Kieran too was no longer on the ship. Re-ite, dark blood, feathers, and body parts suddenly rippled outwards with incredible force, blowing backward and slamming into the aerial beasts behind, stopping their motion. But they only paused for a while before another 100 crows suffered the same fate as the ones in front. Fallen Void Cleave. The name only rang out a few seconds later, as Sir Kieran appeared into the advancing calamitous crow horde. His long katana cleaving through them like a knife through butter. Dark blood slashed into the air and all over Sir Kieran's face. Yet it was like the man had become a demon, ignoring the blood slash as his grin widened through the bloodbath. His wings flapped once, and he tore through the crowds of crows, rain and blood exploding forth wherever he passed. Hundreds of sword slashes laced through the air, the only thing the crows could see before they were all cleaved into nothing, their dead bodies raining from the sky. Oh! Suddenly, a loud, eardrum-splitting sound was made, as the world, which was in an afternoon state, suddenly faded into a pitch-black night. All of existence halted in the air. The airship stopped in its motion. All the geniuses in the space had their momentum stopped, their eyes widening from Sir Kieran's abyssal power. Even Doria, who was typing on a keyboard, had her finger paused, unmoving. All of the crows suddenly popped into nothing but shadows, forming a vortex of shadowy energy that swam straight back to the 5-meter-tall crow at the end of the space. Its aura instantly skyrocketed as its 5-meter height widened to 7 meters, and 2 more iron-like wings grew out from its back, totaling to 4 wings. A cold, dark moon appeared in the sky, shining its dark light onto the shadowy bird. A domain, huh? The thought echoed in Sir Kieran's head as he felt a force trying to stop his movement, making him fall into the time stop. But his sword kept quivering, space shattering apart with every quiver, and forming vortexes that allowed Kieran to ignore the space-time lock effect. Now there was nothing in this dark world, but a fallen man and a monstrous crow towering over him like a god over a mortal. Hey birdie, your bloodline must be pretty pure to be able to harness a primordial law into a domain. Why do I feel jealous of that? Sir Kieran's voice rang out through the space as he floated in the air, a small smirk on his lips, his katana firm in his grasp. You! I sense a familiarity of dark energy from you. But that is impossible, for you're a fallen who will never truly be able to harness the power of darkness due to the pure light force that was used in your race's creation. It's like the little light left in your creation has been snuffed out, leaving nothing but pitch darkness within. Yet your darkness itself is one disgusting, one so evil, it seems beyond darkness itself. What evil sin have you committed, you lost thing? The calamitous crow said, a disgusting expression over its face as it stared at Sir Kieran, whose body suddenly became frigid from the crow's words. He looked at it numbly, dark veins bulging all over his face. Just like I guessed. Are you seeing it now? The deep evil you have committed? The fate of your disgusting darkness devouring you from within. The crow said as if feasting on Sir Kieran's despair, as Sir Kieran's pitch-black eyes stared into the crow's own dark eyes, before turning away and looking at the moon shining on the dark crow itself. The cold, dark abyssal-like moon. What evil sin have I committed? Sir Kieran's gentle voice, one filled no longer with humor or calmness, echoed through the entire domain. What do you know of sin to judge me by the curse of darkness from within? Sir Kieran asked, as the crow's eyes flashed with pitch-black light. Right now, it could see a strange shadow suddenly pop up from behind Sir Kieran's feet, slowly rising up until it towered at 10 meters in height, a katana lying in its left arm. You're the one who stole that skill. Your stupid action led to the deaths of millions of Endurths, and some of my beast species were completely wiped out of the world for your stupid action. You were the one who worsened that war. The calamitous beast's angered roar filled the entire space as its aura multiplied crazily. An intense bellowing rage surged through the entire domain space, an intense red glow bursting from its eyes. Its humongous body soared toward Sir Kieran, its gigantic claws grabbing the space around him, crumbling it into pieces. Its gigantic beak opened up as a pillar of turbulent dark energy emanated from its peak. The attacks alone were enough to shatter the space, unleashing an apocalyptic black hole that swallowed up Sir Kieran's figure. What do you know of sin to wish me death for mine? Dark expansion. My domain is crumbling. The roar of disbelief flashed through the mind of the calamitous crow, yet it convinced itself. There'll be no need. I'm just an inch from cleaving him from existence. The crow thought as its 4 sharp claws sliced downward over Sir Kieran's head. Dark lines spread from the cracking ground beneath its feet as the claws inched closer and closer toward Sir Kieran's body, threatening to rip him into shreds. At the same time, the beam of energy from the sky was also rapidly approaching from above, threatening to burn through his essence. Yet to all these life-ending attacks, Sir Kieran's eyes seemed to have lost their color. His hands, holding the blade, tightened instantly and the entire world went into a pause. The claw attack halted an inch from Sir Kieran's nose. The rippling space paused just before his face. The scorching beam of energy from above froze in mid-air, along with the very space that held it. The calamitous crow's movement had been stopped in mid-air, but while its body was immobilized, its mind was working at full speed. Its eyes widened in shock at Sir Kieran's figure, or more specifically, at the towering shadow now standing behind him. Dark expansion. Eternal night's judgment. Sir Kieran fully pronounced the words, and the entire dark and abyssal-looking world was instantly plunged into an infinite, starless void. The ground transformed into a smooth obsidian plain, reflecting an eerie crimson light emanating from the faint moon, a blood-red moon, hanging in the position where the crow's dark moon had formerly been. Shadowy mountains began rising in the far distance, their jagged peaks reaching toward the void. The air within the domain was insidiously heavy, like gravity had been turned to its maximum, and filled completely with a suffocating silence, broken only by the soft, ominous hum of resonating blades. Blades! The calamitous crow thought in shock. Confirming its thoughts, countless spectral swords, each forged from shadow and edged with a certain malevolent energy, began floating across the domain. These swords drifted like wraiths, their presence incredibly unsettling, as if they hungered for the souls of those caught within the domain. Step, step, step. Suddenly, steps began rippling forth, echoing unnaturally and creating endless ripples on the shadowy ground as Sir Kieran began stepping forward, his gaze now locking directly onto the calamitous crow. But the one who stood before the bird wasn't the same Sir Kieran, even though he held the same sword. The man before the calamitous crow was like a being from hell itself, completely covered in blood-red scales with a humongous, muscular body that brimmed with physical power simply out of this world. On the opposite side of his face besides his forehead were 2 long horns that pointed into the sky, ghostly flames burning gently at their tips. The devil's eyes were full black holes, revealing a chilling abyss whose end seemed unending, trapping the calamitous crow's gaze within their depth. I had thought you would be a nice dummy for me to practice my rusty skill, Sir Kieran said, his voice cold. But now, I'll be ending you for the mere thought of you judging a being like me. Immediately after those words, horror flashed into the calamitous crow's dark eyes as it watched the blade in Sir Kieran's grasp begin pulsating as if alive, gleaming like an inferno. Sir Kieran took a few steps back, putting space between himself and the calamitous crow before taking a slashing stance. Instantly, all the darkness of the domain was absorbed by the katana, which began glowing faintly with a deep, pulsating crimson aura. The air grew colder, the weight of death becoming unbearable for the calamitous crow as the thousands of spectral swords scattered across the domain began converging over Sir Kieran's devilish figure, forming a spiraling vortex of shadow and steel. With a single fluid motion, Sir Kieran performed a devastating slash, unleashing a crescent-shaped arc of black energy. The slash traveled faster than the calamitous crow's eyes could follow, stretching across the entire domain, and it was no ordinary cut. It was an embodiment of destruction, slicing through space, energy, and even the soul of the calamitous crow in its path. As the slash expanded, it devoured everything in its wake, including the calamitous crow, which watched with wide-open eyes as its entire body slowly disintegrated into nothing. The echoes of despair from all those who had suffered the same fate seemed to ring louder in its ears, mingling with the pain of its own body slowly dissolving into nothing. At the last second, the time seemed to slow down for it, as the bird stared at the devil which was still in its slashing position. So this is the end of me, huh? I've simply come out to feast on a few meat and awaken my appetite after my deep slumber. Yet, who would have thought I would meet him here? How I wish I was the one who could bring an end to you. For the millions of lives that was lost to your reckless action. Woe on me for not being the one to bring an end to you. These were last words of the calamitous crow before it faded away completely. Those struck by the eternal eclipse slash were not merely killed. They were erased, their existence consumed by the katana's unholy hunger. The arc slowly dissipated, the domain collapsing into itself, leaving nothing behind but silence and a lingering scar in reality. In the next instant, the katana slowly appeared in Sir Kieran's hands, its hilt glowing faintly. With a swift motion, the blade was dipped into its scabbard. Not long after, a faint booming noise resounded as the black plane appeared behind Sir Kieran for less than a split second, and the man disappeared into it. Appearing in the cockpit where Doria stood with a bizarre expression on her face, Sir Kieran slowly cleaned his spectacles with the edge of his sleeve, now rid of all the crow's blood, before sheathing it fully. Once more, he had regained his gentle, scholarly aura as the ship resumed its direction, edging toward the next destination. Release the geniuses out of the spatial room. What happened? Where is the calamitous crow horde? Doria asked. Sir Kieran simply shrugged before heading into his personal room. The threat has been eliminated. We continue onward to the Ascension Academy. What happened? Murmured the geniuses who had last heard a cawing sound and then found themselves staring at the clear sky, with all the explosions and hordes of crows having mysteriously disappeared into thin air. The danger has been resolved. You all can now return back to your dorms. The order rang out as the door to the small white mini-room opened up, revealing the outside. The geniuses began pouring out. They had no idea what was going on, but at least they were all happy the problem had been resolved. All was okay so far as they were still alive. Ryuk, too, returned back to his room. Yet, he couldn't help but ask upon entering, "Hey system, what happened back there?" After the ear-defeating cawing sounds, a few sets of notifications had appeared before Ryuk's gaze. 3 minutes earlier. Kakawa. Warning. Warning. A mass area ability is being used. Host has been caught within the range of the ability. Scanning for ability type. Ability type scanned. Domain expansion. Calculating lethality. 100%. Warning. A power capable of ending the host's life has been identified. System will begin fighting back. Error. Power too great and cannot be stopped. Host, brace yourself. The red, blaring notification had covered all of Ryuk's vision. Yet, in the next instant, everything returned back to normal, making him wonder if all he saw previously was solely an illusion. It seems the host has been placed under a type of time-stopping domain, based on how the system has accessed the displayed scenarios and calculated all possibilities. Such a time-stop power is enough to bring an end to the host's life, hence the reasons for the warnings. The system explained as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. A time-stop ability, huh? Now that makes more sense. While we were all stuck in time, the battle must have continued. Since the calamitous cawing horde disappeared and only Sir Kieran was standing, he must have somehow managed to defeat it. Ryuk mused to himself. He prepared to get back to what he was doing previously, but stopped when he received another notification from the system. The system advises the host to pause cultivating the primordial frost technique for now. The host is in a dangerous zone, and it would be better to remain fully conscious and ready to detect any danger to life at any time. The system's advice made Ryuk's gaze furrow for a long while before he eventually chose not to summon the grimoire. Truly, the system had a point. They might have been able to defeat the beast horde for now, but who knows when another one would appear. If it caught him while he was in deep meditation in a state of half unconsciousness, that might very well be fatal. Guess I'll just have to make do with my 110 points of mana until we arrive at the school itself and I can feel at peace once more, Ryuk thought as he lay on his bed. Since there was nothing else for him to do and he wasn't feeling sleepy, he could only turn to look at the ceiling blankly. Hours passed by quickly, and luckily there was no other beast horde attack whatsoever, with the rest of the flight being as smooth as ever. Soon, the notification rang through the plane. "We have arrived at the destination. Please prepare for disembarkation." The voice echoed through the room as Ryuk jumped from his bed, his hands grabbing his traveling bag. Immediately, he headed outside, where the other geniuses were also already moving out. The pilot room soon opened, and the one who came out was none other than Sir Kieran. "Listen, you all," Instructor Kieran said seriously as they all directed their attention to him. "We have yet to arrive at the gate of the Ascension Academy, but the Academy has sent an order for us to get down at a particular region. If my guess is right, then that means you all will be facing one test from the Ascension Academy before you're allowed in. With you all carrying travel bags that hold the majority of your belongings, I feel like that can disturb you when you need to fight. So, I'll be giving everyone one of these," Instructor Kieran said, lifting a ring. He passed one to each of them and Ryuk soon grabbed his. "Most of you might already know, this is a spatial ring where you can store any miscellaneous, non-living object you have. Just fuse your consciousness with it, and your bag can appear in there. I wish you all good luck in your endeavors," Instructor Kieran said as the hatch of the small plane immediately opened to them. All of the geniuses kept their travel bags in their rings before they got down. Sir Kieran stood at the door of the plane, his dark eyes lingering on their backs until they all got down into the small grass field, where circles of other race geniuses could already be seen sitting, with some of the planes getting ready to lift into the air. In an instant, the hatch of the Fallen family jet also closed up. All of the fallen geniuses watched it rise into the air before, instantly, it soared into the sky with speed, disappearing into a beam of light. Now, it was safe to say each of the geniuses was now on their own. They were no longer in the Fallen family city where they had always known, nor were their instructors with them. All they had was their own by their side, along with a couple of new alien faces. "We're all truly gathered here, huh?" Darius's loud voice echoed through the grassy field, where the geniuses from the other top 10 families were currently seated, eyeing the Fallen family geniuses one by one. Some had amused smirks, some had off flashing in their eyes, and some had deadpan expressions, choosing to simply ignore the fallen geniuses. The Fallen family was unofficially one of the top 3 most powerful of the top 10 families, so most of the geniuses knew better than to antagonize them. In the end, the fallen geniuses all moved to the side and sat down on the grassy field, joining in with the wait. This few seconds of waiting allowed Ryuk to look over at the remaining family geniuses and observe the differences in races. The first family of geniuses that caught Ryuk's gaze was one that was simply impossible not to notice, as they easily towered over every single genius in the area. They were a total of 9 young men and 1 lady, and the shortest of them was a full 3 meters tall, with 3 of them even reaching around 3.5 meters in height, towering almost twice as tall as Ryuk himself. They all stood silently on their legs, muttering words to themselves, seemingly oblivious to the rest of the geniuses. They were not only tall but also incredibly muscular, and even the lady among them seemed more like a man, with muscles that were far more toned than one would expect from a woman. The Titan family geniuses, Ryuk thought to himself before he turned his gaze away to the next family. This family included someone Ryuk was familiar with, and it was none other than the Vampiro family. Among them was Valora, the vampire mistress Ryuk had met in Gravy, along with Duke the Lion. The Vampiro family geniuses were also 10 in number, consisting of 4 females and 6 males, including Valora herself. They made no sound or engaged in any discussion among themselves. The ladies wore crimson robes that covered their entire bodies, with the hems almost trailing on the ground beneath them, while the men were dressed in formal crimson suits, their long crimson hair cascading down their shoulders. From their bodies, Ryuk could already smell the nauseating scent of blood, a stench that caused most of the other geniuses to keep their distance. Coincidentally, as Ryuk was looking at them, Valora also happened to turn her gaze toward him. A bit of surprise flashed in her crimson pupils before she turned away, flashing an amused smirk and whispering something to a male vampiro beside her. The vampire young man also turned to look at Ryuk but simply stared blankly before shifting his gaze elsewhere. The exchange of gazes and Valora's whispering with her family geniuses after seeing Ryuk caught the attention of someone sitting beside him. "You know the red-haired girl?" Morgaine asked, raising an eyebrow. If she had expected Ryuk to know any of the family geniuses, the last person she would have guessed was some vampire girl. "I do," Ryuk replied, drawing a furrowed brow from Morgaine before turning his gaze back to the scene in front of him. "Are both of you really close?" she pressed with a chuckle, and it was Ryuk's turn to raise an eyebrow. "We're everything but close. I've only met her once, and it was as a result of a little skirmish. I bet she still hates me," he mused. Morgaine chuckled before whispering in his ear, "Don't worry. If she tries anything funny, I'll kick her ass for you." They both chuckled, and he continued surveying the other families. The next eye-catching family was actively conversing with another family. They were none other than a family with very striking long hair, with the majority of them possessing vibrant green color of it. They were mostly females, the only group that could rival the Fallens in beauty, and had only a single male among them. Surprisingly, his hair was long and golden, resembling that of a Fallen, except he had the same pointed ears as the ladies. The elven race. The male elf made no move, simply sitting cross-legged, while the female elves conversed with another group of women who weren't entirely humanoid. So this is how the Serpentine, or more accurately, the Nagas look, huh? Ryuk thought. The group before him consisted solely of females and looked no different from ordinary women, except that most of them had black tattoos on their faces and arms, and instead of legs, they had long snake-like tails. The majority of their tails were dark in color, with only 3 Nagas possessing tails in white color. Parts of their faces had snake-like scales emanating from their cheeks. Somehow they should have looked horrifying, but surprisingly, they possessed their own unique beauty. They seemed very close to the elven women, and the area was the loudest in the field. The next family Ryuk observed was a group of males who were all surprisingly short, with the tallest standing at about 1 meter in height. They looked no different from humans, except for their dwarfish appearance. Yes, those were the dwarves. There were no female dwarves among them, and their clothes seemed to be made of some sort of metal instead of fabric. They muttered amongst themselves, with occasional boisterous laughter erupting every few seconds. They seemed to have the closest bond with one another among all the other families of geniuses. The next race that caught Ryuk's attention was one that also looked no different from humans, except for their large amount of body hair. The shortest of them was the same height as Ryuk, burly in appearance, while the tallest was 2 meters tall. When they talked, Ryuk noticed they had fangs like vampires but no pointed ears. Their eyes came in shades of green and blue, with only one individual having crimson eyes. Are those werewolves? They somehow seem so easily mistaken for humans, Ryuk thought to himself as he observed them. Surprisingly, one of the werewolves caught Ryuk's gaze due to his simple anomaly. He was none other than the one with crimson eyes, unlike the rest, and with his fangs and red eyes almost made him look like one of the vampire. In fact, if he happened to have pointed ears, then he would have been easily mistaken as a vampire. He raised his hand and waved at Ryuk with a small smile, and Ryuk waved back. He seems surprisingly friendly, Ryuk thought before turning his gaze to another race that made him furrow his eyebrows, wondering just what type of sorcery was currently going on. The race before him was simply mind-boggling. They looked like birds, yet they were humans, making Ryuk feel like his brain was no longer functioning properly. Instead of human heads, they all had bird heads with long beaks. Most of them had feathers for hair, and their claws were clearly visible, glinting like the edge of the sharpest daggers. Their eyes were incredibly piercing to behold, and they had different colors of feathers, even amongst each other. Surprisingly, it wasn't hard to distinguish the males from the females because of their body shape. The females had larger, more accentuated curves, even though, with their bird heads, one would still find it hard to identify anything feminine about them. There was only a single individual among them who didn't have a bird head. Instead, He had a human head with feathers at the sides of his cheeks, but he bore 2 large wings folded behind him. The avian race. Somehow, they're the least humanoid among all the RIP 10 families, followed by this other race. Ryuk mused as he turned his head to the side and found a race that consisted mainly of females. But they were strange in the sense that each had a ball of water floating above their heads, somehow pouring water into their bodies. Yet, instead of their clothes being soaked in water, surprisingly they weren't, and the water wasn't dripping to the ground. Instead, it disappeared directly into their bodies. Most of them had fins covering their cheeks, along with eye-catching blue hair. They walked on legs and wore revealing clothes that exposed parts of their legs. There was only a single male among them. He had the same blue hair but bore a strange small blue crown on his head. Their lips were moving, but Ryuk, even with his sharp senses, couldn't pick up any information. All he heard was the sound of water jiggling and disrupting any clarity. Still, I feel like I could forcefully pierce through the weird water barrier and listen to their words, but that may just cause problems. Ryuk mused, choosing to ignore them instead. The last race was hard to distinguish in form, let alone identifying whether they were male or female. They were all clad in long pitch-dark robes that covered their legs, completely obscured their hands, and had hoods covering the top parts of their faces. The only part visible was the lower portion of their faces, yet one would see nothing but flickering shadows there. They all stood motionless, making no sound. Their presence was gravely silent and somehow chilling to the heart. It was as if they didn't even exist at all, almost like shadows. The Shadow Walkers, Ryuk mused. He found them pretty interesting since they were shrouded in secrecy, but they also didn't radiate much of a threat, making it easy for him to simply skip over their figures. The place held only the 10 family geniuses, and since there were 10 from each family, there were a total of 100 geniuses present in the field. They all seemingly waited patiently, but not for long, as everyone heard an explosive sound echoing in the distance, accompanied by a bright light moving rapidly in their direction. All of the geniuses immediately rose to their feet. Barely 3 seconds later, a large shockwave exploded in the air, sending wild gusts of air blowing across the field. 2 beams of light paused mid-air and slowly descended, stopping at about 2 meters above the ground. The light soon cleared, and their faces were revealed. One was actually a human male, seemingly aged around 25, with short dark hair. The other was a lady elf, still covered in green light. Welcome, students of the Ascension Academy. Yes, you are already students of the Academy. You don't need an extra test to prove that, the human male said, causing some of the geniuses to raise an eyebrow. Then what are we doing here, then? A genius from the vampire family asked, voicing what was on the minds of the majority. Good question, whose answer I will leave in the hands of Lady Friera. You're here for a test known as the ranking test. This test will determine your position in the academy and hence your treatment. The elf, Lady Friera, explained. The Ascension Academy operates on the rules of hierarchy, and the strongest get the highest hierarchy, which translates to more benefits. The weaker ones are at the bottom of the hierarchy, which also means fewer benefits, and in some cases no benefits at all. For all of the newcomers, there is the newcomers hierarchy ranking. Your treatment, including access to more powerful cultivation manuals, better equipment, lectures from more powerful and experienced instructors, and more rewarding quests, will depend on your position. This ranking will be effective for a month. Mind you, there are more than 100 newcomers, but you 100 will take the top 100 hierarchy spots because of your backgrounds. The higher you rank in the hierarchy by passing the test well, the better the treatment you get. Indirectly, this also correlates to how fast your growth will be, opening doors to more possibilities. Hence, the hierarchy test. Do you all understand? She asked, and everyone nodded. It was hard not to understand, as the same hierarchy existed in every family of geniuses. Even in the Fallen family, there were hierarchy tests that ranked them from 1 to 60. It seemed the Ascension Academy followed the same structure. Well then, with that understood, let's go to the content of this test. And it really is simple. At the end of this forest is the Ascension Academy gate. Simply cross the forest and arrive before the gate. Your ranking will be determined by how early you are to the gate, she said as the geniuses simply looked on blankly wondering what exactly she meant by simply crossing a forest as some sort of test. But their confusion dispersed when an holographic image appeared in the air. The holographic image spread over the entire sky, and each of the students could clearly see it. It was mainly divided into 3 areas. One of the areas was a place with dotted red lines, and just 2 green dots amongst the dotted lines. One could take these red dotted lines to represent the geniuses and the green ones signifying the 2 Ascension Academy students in front of them. After the area showing the dotted lines was another area denoted with trees. It was none other than the forest before the students, taking a larger portion. Following the forest area was an area with the structure of a school with other buildings standing almost like a city. That was none other than the Ascension Academy. Now each of the students understood what they needed to do. The academy was the end goal, and standing in the path of that goal was the forest before them. All they needed to do was cross the forest, and the earlier they crossed the forest and appeared before the school gate, the higher their ranks and potentially more rewards. It was an incredibly simple test, one which seemed too simple for a renowned school such as the Ascension Academy. After the students understood, the holograph was withdrawn by them, and they both slowly floated into the air. Now that you all understand the objectives, I wonder who will be the first top 10 amongst you? Those were the last words of the human, who instantly became a beam of light soaring away and disappearing into the distance. Seems like this will be an easy win for our avian race. Ha ha ha. The boisterous laughter of the bird-like humanoids rang out as they slowly rose into the air with the aid of their wings and soon shot into the distance. Because they possessed wings, it was almost an unfair advantage, but the geniuses didn't seem to be bothered by that. Wings alone weren't enough to beat them in a run. Instantly, all of the geniuses began disappearing into the forest, fading away amongst the trees. Ryuk was about to ask whether they all wanted to stick together to cross the forest, but he closed his mouth when he saw the fallen geniuses walking away in their own personal direction. It was obvious what the answer was. Each student was there for him or herself. The earlier you get to the gate, the better. They didn't seem like they would be needing any teamwork. Well then, a voice sounded beside Ryuk's ear as he turned his head, finding Morgane calmly walking away. See you at the front gate, Ryuk, she said as she slowly disappeared into the forest. Soon enough there was only Ryuk left. Am I the only one who thinks this forest will be anything but normal? If we had stuck together, we would have had better advantages with greater numbers and better options to handle whatever it was. Yet every single genius all went their own ways. Ryuk mused, wondering if he was the only sane person, but then he shrugged helplessly as he also began walking. Guess I'll just have to face whatever is out there alone, just like how I've always done. He mused, and his figure also faded away from the area, which was soon returned to silence. Step, step, step. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the area as a snow-white figure passed through the various trees with speed, his eyes directed to the front. The figure was none other than Ryuk, and the deeper he went, the more he felt uncomfortable. Somehow, he couldn't help but have all of his hairs standing on end. To top it all off, he hadn't met a single one of the geniuses all through his run that had lasted for 3 hours now. 100 geniuses in a forest which didn't seem to be that big. At the very least, he ought to come across a single figure, but he had yet to find anyone. There's something wrong. Something really wrong. Ryuk mused. As if to prove his thoughts, he suddenly raised his head and found tumultuous pitch-black clouds starting to cover the entire sky. Not long after, pack, 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 rain began pouring down, and he couldn't help but pause in his steps, his hand stretching out toward the rain. It's raining? Why at this time of all times? He whispered asked, but his eyes flashed when he saw the notification. Mana, -1. Mana, -1. Mana, -1. So the raindrops take away mana with every drop, huh? Ryuk mused as he stepped away from the rain and took shade under a tree to confirm his thoughts. And just like he guessed, the notification of mana being deducted disappeared. Most of the geniuses will suffer from this. I have the system, and that's why I immediately noticed the rain was draining mana. None of the geniuses have the same, so they will only wonder why they're suddenly getting weaker. Those who can fly will need mana to fly, so this automatically cancels out their advantages. Pretty genius. And also, I really am not alone. Just like I guessed. Ryuk mused. Less than a split second later, a gigantic claw tore through Ryuk's figure hiding beneath the tree, ripping the tree trunk into bits. The slashed tree was instantly sent flying toward the other trees, knocking into them and smashing them into pieces. Instantly, an area of 10 meters was cleared away of trees, and the ground 3 meters away bore long claw marks dragging across it. The figure responsible for the attack was a 4-meter-tall tiger with steel-like paws. Instead of a tail, it had a scorpion's stinger dangling behind it. Slowly raising its paw to itself, the tiger expected the sweet smell of blood, but then it found nothing. Looking 11 meters away, it spotted a figure sitting on a tree, his curious eyes looking up and down at the tiger. A tiger at the peak stage of the Plane of Ascension? Interesting, really, but not impressive either, Ryuk thought to himself, taking his gaze away from the tiger and looking into the distance. Exactly 60 meters away from here, I can sense a creature with a more powerful aura. A creature at the early stage of the Plane of Dominion. Roar! The tiger's roar brought Ryuk back as he slowly turned his eyes to it, finding a gigantic maw appearing above his head, snapping at Ryuk's figure. If it drew close, Ryuk's entire upper body would be bitten to nothing, but instead of dodging, Ryuk jumped directly and fully entered the tiger's mouth, which instantly shut close. But then, 3 lines appeared all over the tiger's head and face, 2 crossing diagonally, and another slicing down from the tiger's forehead straight to its neck. With horror and confusion, the tiger landed back onto the ground, only to collapse onto its side as its head opened up, revealing the figure of Ryuk. The scythe nanobots slowly disappeared back into his arm. Even when Ryuk was at the origin plane, he could already battle peak stage fallen geniuses. Now that he was at the core of the peak stage, his strength wasn't something a barbaric tiger at the peak of the ascension plane could hope to last a second against. I understand fully what is going on now. The little forest that we ought to cross to reach the gate isn't necessarily as little as it seems. But it isn't that large either. When I was running for the past 3 hours, I've noticed some trees looking a little too similar to others, as if I had crossed them before. But since all trees almost look the same, I could say I was just running past another tree. But now I can confirm it. This is no forest, Ryuk mused. This is a formation instead. The distance between the place where we all left and the academy isn't obscured by a forest. It is just a formation laid down, and one will have to pass. The rain falling reduces the mana of everything, and most likely falls through this entire formation. But while everyone uses mana, I don't necessarily do. I have the nanobody, and all that matters to me is my endurance. Most of the geniuses will find it wise to hide from the rain and wait for it to pause to conserve mana. But then the beasts suddenly appeared, and based on how the tiger easily found my figure, it is safe to say everyone has their own beasts coming for them. The beasts will force them to fight, and if they get exposed to the rain, their mana drains. Now, not only do they have to avoid the onslaught of the beasts, they also have to conserve mana and dodge the rain too. Pretty difficult task. And more importantly, even though I can sense beasts in front of me a few miles from here, I can't sense any explosions, meaning all geniuses are stuck in parts of their own formation. The tiger found me as if it had been coming for me. All the beasts I'll be facing from now on will be beasts that already have me as their target. And there will be no geniuses around. Somehow, it feels like we all have entered a maze, with walls that guide away every genius from the other. All I need to do is walk through this maze, defeat all the obstacles, beasts and the mana-depleting rain, and get to the end of the maze. But that also simplifies things and changes who really wins. The one who wins isn't the one who can run the most or who is the fastest. It is the strongest. The one who can kill these beasts the fastest and preserve enough mana to kill them. Something made difficult by the mana-depleting rain. The test isn't the forest itself. It's the obstacles in the formation. And right now, it's just two. My hypothesis. Once the beast obstacle is gotten rid of, I assume this formation will crack into nothing, and I will suddenly appear at the feet of the gate of the Ascension Academy. I can already see some idiotic winged geniuses thinking of outflying the beasts, but the forest will never end, and they'll just exhaust their mana. TSK. TSK. How clever. Ryuk mused to himself as he slowly cracked his bones, feeling the ground rumbling as the closest beast began moving forward toward him. Since no genius is watching, I can go all out. But still, I don't know if all of the Ascension Academy instructors are also viewing this, so I can't go too all out and draw unnecessary suspicion either. Ryuk mused as he turned his head to the sky, seeing nothing but the endless blue expanse, which he knew was nothing more than fake. But then, I plan to be among the top 30 geniuses in the hierarchy, since the Fallen family is one of the strongest families and they will expect their genius to be so. That range is just perfect, Ryuk stated as his scythe instantly found its way into his hands. While it would be better to use his ice ability with the rain-depleting mana with every droplet, the power of his ice manipulation would also keep depleting, reducing the power of his attacks and making him just like the ordinary geniuses. But with his scythe, all he needs is endurance, which wasn't draining away with the rain, and that enabled Ryuk to gain an advantage which he plans to make good use of. Boom! The entire ground shook as a gigantic figure appeared above Ryuk, its shadow completely covering him. Instantly, a spray of acid spilled out like rain toward Ryuk, who smashed his leg into the ground. A gigantic pothole appeared beneath his feet, and he shot upward toward the incoming rain of acid, his scythe cleaving outward and blasting a hole through, and he appeared before the slitted eyes. I accept the challenge. Ryuk's scythe flashed with speed toward the serpent's head, but at the last second, it jerked back its head, black blood spurting into the air before its gigantic tail suddenly slammed out, smashing into Ryuk's figure and sending him flying downwards. Boom! Two explosions rang out as both combatants collapsed onto the ground, instantly surging toward each other. A pillar of acid spray flashed forward toward Ryuk's path as he sidestepped to the side, appearing meters away and dodging the spray. But it was only the beginning, as the python kept spraying faster, the entire poison covering more of the airspace. Still, Ryuk's movement was simply beyond this world, and before the snake could use its tail smack, he was already 5 meters away. In the next instant, it spat out one last, incredibly poisonous spray that burned the air itself, covering all of Ryuk's surroundings and ensuring it would be impossible for the young man to dodge. In the end, he would be corroded completely through. The result of the battle seemed clear as Ryuk made no move to dodge, allowing the spray to fall onto him. But instead of being corroded into nothing, activate Frost Veil, he ordered, as deep cold emanated from Ryuk's legs, spreading into the air around him. All of the corrosive spray paused in the air, frozen completely into ice blocks. Re-eye. With bulging eyes, the serpent watched as the scythe image cleaved through its head, ripping it apart into 2 slices until it tore out of its end, dark blood spraying all over the area as its body collapsed to the ground. Without looking back, Ryuk leapt up with incredible speed, feeling the pulsing from the ground coming from none other than his next beast. He blocked and suddenly the ground, covered in frost, exploded. Boom! The scythe's edge and a punch smashed into each other. But this time, Ryuk was shocked as he felt a colossal force swimming through his scythe. Instantly, he shot backward with speed, slamming into the trees behind him, forcing them to the ground and clearing the area. The ape also suffered an injury, as it was now taking repeated steps backward, blood dripping from its fist. But then it rose up and bounced once more, closing in on the soaring Ryuk, whose legs smashed into the ground as he flew backward. He sighted the gigantic fist crashing down onto his figure from above. An iron fist ape at the initial plane of dominion. Nice! He muttered as he instantly sidestepped, causing the fist to crash into the ground and the ape's head to lower. Instantly, Ryuk swung his scythe toward its face, wanting to rip it apart. But the ape's speed was otherworldly as it jumped backward, narrowly dodging the blade that only shaved off a few hairs on its face. Stretching his left hand to the side while running forth, ice began gathering in Ryuk's left arm, soon forming the image of a gigantic ice sword with cold edges. But it wasn't the end. Hundreds of smaller swords began appearing from the larger sword and rushed toward the gigantic ape, which instantly slapped out its enormous palms, blowing away the ice. But in the next instant, Suo-air, the sound of something soaring forth rang out as the ape barely felt the thrown scythe flying toward its face, instantly ripping apart its eyeballs. Roar! A mournful roar was uttered, but it was silenced when Ryuk took advantage of the distraction, jumping up into the air for 10 meters. With both hands gripping the end of the frost sword, he drove it straight into the beast's forehead. The sharp edges cracked apart the tough skull and dipped into the beast's brain. The ape wanted to roar out loud from the shock, but the monumental coldness from the ozone froze its brain completely, letting it mutter nothing but a whisper before the frost instantly spread, covering the entire brain. With a loud stomp from Ryuk, the force of the kick instantly transferred to the frozen brain, which shattered into pieces. He jumped off as the ape smashed into the ground lifelessly, stretching his hand to the side. His thrown scythe appeared in his hands as he continued onward while looking at the lifeless body of the ape. Was the creature strong? Absolutely. In fact, Ryuk's scythe had only managed to slice open the flesh of its fist and not crack the bone. When Ignatius forms his flame swords, he uses them as a main source of attack. But I think this is a waste. The swords are too little to deal any true damage. Their true purpose is to create an opening. The ape, seeing the sheer amount of swords around its body, signaled that it would be a very powerful attack, diverting its attention away from the sword in my hand, which held the true energy. While it was dealing with the swords, I took advantage of the weakest part of its body, the eyeballs, and flung my scythe through it, something the beast would never have expected. The distraction of its eyeballs being severed was enough to finally use my ultimate attack, the sword, where all my ice energy is focused, and bring an end to the battle. Ryuk analyzed coldly, as the ice swords soon dispersed into thin air. His idea of forming the ice swords wasn't his. It was from Ignatius, and Ryuk somehow felt proud for being able to emulate it and use it in battle, perhaps even better than Ignatius would have used it himself. Host must understand. While the ability to cultivate mana is important, as well as Host's scythe being powerful enough to cut through almost anything at his level of strength, two things can still not be replaced: combat ability and combat intelligence. If an opponent who only relies on brute strength meets an opponent less inferior but with greater combat ability and intelligence, then he is bound to lose eventually. Just like how Host dealt with the barbaric ape. And there is only one way for Host to increase his combat ability: to keep fighting. Ryuk stated as he once more felt the distant roar of a rapidly approaching beast. Without waiting, he continued onwards. This wasn't just a test. It was an opportunity to improve his combat ability. In a dimly lit room, a group of 10 sat around on a circular sofa, legs crossed and smirks on their lips as they all looked at the various holographics floating before their eyes, situated at the center of the room and clear for all to see. They all shared a common aspect: red shirts and dark trousers. Most wore spectacles, dressed like instructors of an academy, and indeed, they were none other than some of the instructors from the Ascension Academy. It seems this generation of family geniuses isn't that bad themselves. Ha ha ha. A chubby man, seemingly in his early 40s, called out with a boisterous laugh as the instructors looked at the holographics. Even though about 80 to 100 fights were currently ongoing, each instructor could easily process everything with ease, watching all 100 at the same time. Truly, there are a few exceptional ones, like that giant Kin, an instructor noted, drawing the attention of the group to a particular holographic display. In the hologram was the figure of an enormous titan, close to 10 meters in pure height, bulging with rippling muscles and radiating intense apex energy. Every step he took caused tremors, and all the beasts attacking him were reduced to nothing, either by a casual punch or simply being stomped to death. That little alpha boy too is not bad, another instructor observed, as their gaze rested on a young man with crimson eyes casually walking through a forest. The beasts rushed toward him, but the young man didn't even seem to move before they all suddenly crashed to the ground. On their necks were 3 elongated claw marks that instantly ripped away their life. One couldn't even see the young man take his hands out of his pockets, leaving everyone to wonder just how the beasts suddenly died whenever they got too close to him. The fallen girl too is quite good, although a bit brutish for a fallen who are known for their more calm and inherently deadly attacks. She fights like a titan, a lady said among them, her eyes shining a deep purple as she stared at Morgaine, whose figure blitzed around beasts. Suddenly, the creatures would explode upon her passing, as relentless attacks rained down on the hordes, tearing them to pieces. But him, isn't he a bit strange? An instructor with a refined aura and seemingly in his early 30s called out. He seemed like the youngest among them, but the other elders paused their speech to look at whom he was referencing, and they soon found out. A young man with a humongous scythe in hand was fighting beast after beast, surrounded by the blood and corpses of creatures ripped into 2 halves. Occasionally, his figure would be covered in ice daggers, which he used more as a distraction. His combat style, however, was incredibly deadly, precisely targeting the beast's weakest areas and ending them with a swift stroke. A seemingly calm combat style, yet deadly with precision. Sure, he seems pretty talented at spotting the beast's weak points, and his combat ability isn't too shabby. But he seems to owe his success to that artifact he's using, doesn't he? An instructor stated, referencing the humongous scythe Ryuk was holding. Truly, it was hard not to notice. The other geniuses were using their various skills and abilities, but the young man seemed to rely on an artifact instead. As much as an artifact's power was a strength in itself, it was looked down upon, as one couldn't claim it to be true combat ability. People like Ryuk, once their weapon broke, would typically see their combat power drop by 50% due to their over-reliance on their weapon. No, the scythe is not an artifact. It's his personal skill seemingly made from some type of weird nanobots? An instructor wearing spectacles remarked, leaning forward toward Ryuk's figure. His eyes suddenly shifted into a galaxy-like glow, hundreds of star-like runes spiraling within them, effortlessly magnifying Ryuk's figure. Just like most typical humans, knowing well of their lack of comprehension of elements, they tend to fuse with apex technologies like fighting nanobot suits and artifacts. A powerful but inferior path of cultivation. What is a human doing under the name of the fallen family, though? An instructor with an earpiece asked, slowly removing his hand from the button on the tech tool. Truly interesting, the instructor who had first called out Ryuk said, his eyes flashing an intrigued light as he looked at Ryuk's valiant figure. From now on, this human's watch is mine. I'll supervise his training and be the one to record him, the man stated, as the other instructors pursed their lips. They haven't even started yet with picking geniuses to mentor, but the young instructor has already made his choice. Very unlike you to choose a supervised genius so early, Mad White. What? Is it because the boy is the only human worthy enough to rank together with the top 10 family geniuses, just like you? A lady with long purple hair asked, smirking at the young instructor, who simply shrugged his shoulders, ignoring the rest of the unfolding holographics. Just leave the boy to me. You all can fight over the rest. And it wouldn't kill to be a bit partial toward one of my own race, would it? Ah! 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 Turbid white air escaped Ryuk's lips as he looked around him, the corpses of about 50 or so beasts lying all around. Congratulations, host! You have killed a total of 30 beasts at the peak of the stage of Ascension and killed 20 beasts at the initial stage of Dominion. Host has earned plus 22,000 EXP. The system called out as Ryuk regulated his breathing. His eyes soon settled on a gargantuan vortex that appeared just a few minutes after he slaughtered the last beast. Just like I guessed, Ryuk thought as his scythe disappeared back into him, and his body blew out frost-white mist that blew the blood on him away. Congratulations on passing the hierarchy test. Your ranking is number 10. Guess I ended up in the top 10 even after I only aimed to be in the top 30. Ryuke thought as he looked at the 9 others standing before him. He was familiar with 2 of them. One was Morgaine, who was already there, waving at him. The other was the werewolf boy with strange red eyes, who had previously waved at Ryuk, and he had nodded in acknowledgement when he appeared. There was also the only male elf, who had a crown on his head, already standing having arrived. Beside him was the guy from the avian race, who was the only one with a humanoid head instead of a bird-like head. A dwarf stood among them too, the shortest of his kind. Then, there was a crimson-haired vampire with pointy ears and closed eyes. The 7th figure was an incredibly tall titan, standing at 3 meters. His arms were folded across his chest, and finally, there was a Naga with a white snake tail, who stared curiously at Ryuk. I know Morgaine is already strong, but the fact that these others are here means they must either be as strong as her or perhaps even stronger. What can't be doubted is that they all must be pretty powerful. Similarly, the other 9 also observed Ryuk. The fallen human managed to make it into the top 10. He must be incredibly strong, was the collective thought echoing in their minds. The gate had yet to open for entry, perhaps because it only would once everyone arrived. Eventually, Ryuk moved to Morgaine's side and waited. In the end, the fallen race was the only group with 2 representatives in the top 10. Time flowed quickly, and all the geniuses began arriving, taking note of their hierarchy. After 3 hours, a total of 100 people gathered. The last one to arrive was a dwarf, tallest of his kind, who walked slowly into the group, leaning on the shoulders of 2 other dwarves. Did those tiny beasts really give you so much trouble, Garnet? The dwarf who was in the top 10 asked loudly, bursting into laughter. I'm very sorry, Raymond, Garnet replied weakly. Don't worry about it. Fighting isn't exactly the strength of our kind anyway, Raymond said, waving dismissively. With everyone finally gathered, the gigantic gate of the Ascension Academy opened, revealing a middle-aged man slowly stepping forth. He had long blue hair and eyes of the same color, standing at 1.9 meters tall with a refined and calm aura. I believe you are now all very aware of your rankings. Just to let you know, you all went through the same scenarios as the rest, so it was a very fair test, the man said. However, if you still feel it was unfair, the opportunity to challenge higher hierarchies will be open soon, perhaps in a month or 2, so you'll get your chance. But for now, swallow it up, he added, scanning the group. Some of the geniuses were visibly displeased, feeling the rankings were flawed, but with the man's stern words, they had no choice but to bottle up their grievances, at least for now. With that out of the way, I am Instructor Ferdinand, or you can call me Inferdy for short. I'm here to give you a comprehensive guide to the Ascension Academy, he announced. As he spoke, a blue wave of energy radiated from his feet, covering the entire area where the geniuses stood. Slowly, it solidified into flat, floating platforms beneath their feet. Ryu felt the powerful force holding him tightly to the platform, which seemed more a flying mat as it lifted him and the other geniuses into the air. Soon, the platforms carrying the students along with Instructor Ferdinand zoomed into the massive gates of the Ascension Academy. The gates shut behind them with a loud bang before fading into the air, as though they had never existed. There are 3 areas in the Ascension Academy. Instructor Ferdinand's calm and clear voice echoed through the windy air as the floating platforms carried the geniuses above grassy plains and toward towering structures. The newcomer area, the second-year area, and the third-year area. Since you are all newcomers, your territory will be the entire newcomer area. Never, I repeat, never set foot in the second-year area. You won't be able to reach the third-year area of the academy without first stepping into the second-year area of the academy first. All newcomers are strictly banned from entering the second-year area, even if invited by a second year. You must never set foot there, he warned firmly. The stark restriction piqued the curiosity of some geniuses, making them wonder what secrets the second-year area held. But they weren't foolish enough to ignore the warning, especially since it was the first rule they were given. That said, there are various buildings and structures within the newcomer area where you will all reside. The most important is, naturally, your dormitory. Look at that skyscraper, Instructor Ferdinand suddenly said, pointing to the distance. A gigantic skyscraper almost pierced through the clouds, surrounded by shimmering blue energy like a curtain that obscured its full view. That is the newcomer's skyscraper. Inside are about 800 rooms. And just so you know, you 100 are not the only newcomers, he said with a slight smirk. Of course, others also passed the Ascension Academy entrance test. However, you 100 were given priority in the hierarchy due to your exceptional family backgrounds. But don't let this get to your head. There are geniuses among the lower-ranking races who are stronger than some of you combined, he added, causing the top 10 family geniuses to frown. What nonsense is that? They were the top 10 family geniuses. The 10 strongest. What does it mean that a lower race genius from a family with no name could defeat some of their strongest combined? The number 1 student on the hierarchy owns the building at the very top of the skyscraper, closest to the sky. The second student owns the second floor, and like that, ownership goes downward. Of course, there are some students who will have to stay on the same floors as others. Why is the top 1 on the hierarchy list placed on the topmost floor, you may ask? Well, we all know one thing a cultivator cannot do without, and that is apex energy. This is where your hierarchy comes in. You see, that shimmering curtain of blue you see is an artifact that absorbs apex energy from the surrounding area for thousands of kilometers. And it acts as a black hole that sucks apex energy, distributing it to whatever is placed within its boundary, which is the dorm room. But the skyscraper itself is built with special materials, such that the top of the skyscraper is constructed with a metal that absorbs the largest amount of apex energy. The concentration of that metal decreases downwards. That means at the utmost top, holding the greatest concentration of the apex energy-absorbing metal, the concentration of mana is at a full 100%. As it is always absorbing the most mana from the apex energy curtain. The only person worth staying in that building is the one who is number 1 on the hierarchy. The second floor of the apex structure holds the second highest concentration of the apex energy-absorbing metal, and therefore also absorbs the second highest amount of concentration. But this concentration is half of the first block. That means the second best amongst you only uses 50% of the total concentration of mana as the guy on the first floor. This continues having until the last unfortunate guy on the ranking, the man said with a chuckle, but the geniuses didn't find it funny at all. The reason was simple. So yes, as you can all guess, the cultivation speed of the guy in the number 1 floor will be thousands of times faster than, say, the guys on the 100th to 250th floor. Even if he is using a crappy cultivation technique, he would still make no problem cultivating just as fast as you guys using the best cultivation technique. And if he also just happens to have a good cultivation technique, then the chances of you guys ever catching up to him decreases based on how low on the floor plane you are. There is already a disparity of strength amongst you all, but not that wide. You all are almost as strong as the other. But I'll say, in just a few weeks from now, some of you will be given so much gap that you'll never be able to catch up to your mates until eternity. Now, I wonder if there are some of you regretting not having taken the hierarchy test a bit more seriously. Hee. Instructor Ferdinand said as some of the students clicked their tongues. Of course, there were some of them that didn't want to attract too much attention and did not go all out, but now that will be costing them so much. Damn, Ryuk himself thought in his head. It had never occurred to him that the hierarchy test would hold so much weight. Thankfully, he had gotten lost in the battle and had moved faster than he had thought, ending up in the top 10. It would have been way worse if he had ended up in the top 30 like he was formerly planning. But hey, it isn't like the guy ranked last on the hierarchy won't have mana in his building at all. He would actually have, in fact, perhaps even greater than the best cultivation rooms in the other grades. Grade A is the most powerful and highly concentrated mana area in the entire End-Earth after all. So even if you're the last, your cultivation speed would still increase at a jaw-dropping level compared to those in the other grades. Although, it will be nothing compared to the top of the top in this place. The man said, perhaps to help those who were feeling sad. But it didn't do much. And besides, this hierarchy ranking of you guys is not completely set in stone. In a month or 2 from now, there will be another hierarchy test where you all will be given an equal chance. Perhaps that time you would take better advantage of it. With the dorm room having been said, let's check out the next most important building in the entire place, and it is called the Apex Store, Sir Ferdinand said and moved the platform higher in the air, making the various buildings seem clearer. You all look at that rectangular building, the man said, pointing to a rectangular building at the side, and they all turned to see the black-looking structure made of some mysterious gemstone that seemed to absorb all the light onto itself, making it shiny and incredibly eye-catching. That is the Apex Store, and what does it do, you all may ask? Well, it is the second best place to be after your dorm room, as within it lies the best of the best cultivation techniques Endearth has to give. Battle techniques that can split an entire world in half, and even some domain techniques that can freeze up time and space itself. This Apex Store contains all you need for anything to do with a cultivator being powerful. And I already know some of you are thinking in your hearts that, well, I'm a genius from the top 10 most powerful families of Endearth. My family's cultivation techniques are superior to whatever may be inside that. Well, then I'm sorry to burst your bubble. To compare your family's cultivation techniques to the cultivation techniques in this place is to compare a diamond with an ordinary stone. Trash still wouldn't do justice to your family's cultivation technique compared to the Apex Store, the man said with a cold humph and pride as the geniuses shifted their eyes away in suspicion. And there's only one way to acquire all of these incredibly powerful cultivation techniques and battle techniques. Apex points, Instructor Ferdinand said loudly. In an instant, he stretched his hands towards them as something suddenly began appearing in the air, hovering in the face of each of the students. These before you are your Apex watches. They serve many uses, the most important of which is that here you will receive announcements from the Academy, and the second most important, your bank accounts. Yes, this watch is where your Apex points will be stored. Right now, free points are distributed to everyone, based on rankings, of course. The top 10 get the same number of points, which is a total of 1,500. The man said as he waved his hand, and quickly, the watches began appearing in front of everyone. When Ryuk looked at his, it clearly displayed the number 1,500. The top 20 to top 50 will get the same number of Apex points, which is 1,200. The top 50 to top 100 will get 1,000. And so on below the hierarchy, but that has nothing to do with you, does it? The man said as everyone now had their Apex watch. This watch is the second thing that identifies you as a student of the Ascension Academy. It must never, ever be taken off. Not like you guys can even take it off without slicing off your hands. Even if you slice off your hand, it would gum itself onto your body still. The man smiled coldly, loud enough for everyone to hear, as Ryuk's hand unconsciously moved to the watch. He pulled, but the watch wouldn't budge no matter how hard he tried. But of course, there are some of you with weird abilities that could manage to take it off. Well then, the second you take off your watch, you cease to be a part of the Ascension Academy, and the second you cease to be a student, you're trespassing on Academy territory. Do you know what the punishment is for trespassing in the most powerful organization of Endearth is? The man asked, giving them all a sly smile, and they all couldn't help but swallow hard. So yeah, never take off your watch. It wouldn't fall even if you're in the greatest battle of your life, and even a cultivator at the stage of Cataclysm wouldn't be able to destroy it. So you can't lie that it was mistakenly destroyed, unless you're saying you met with a cultivator who is at the plane of eternity, and that's a clear lie since you yourself wouldn't survive to tell the tale. I hope I have made my point clear, the man said, as the students nodded. That said, your points can be transferred to others. Just like I said, it's a bank account where you can add and receive points from others, meaning also that your points can be forcibly stolen from you, the man said. You at the top can expect some of the geniuses ganging up on you and taking away your points. It is very much allowed in the Academy. The man grinned sinisterly as the genius eyes narrowed. And of course, with you guys already being given an unfair advantage and allowed to be in the top 100 hierarchy, you've already attracted the hate and envy of the other geniuses who came into the Ascension Academy the proper way. So you guys already have about 400 people who think it's unfair to place you above them just because of your background. Even if they want to ignore you, they can always use the excuse of wanting to steal your points to attack you and take revenge for the unfair treatment. So I'll say some of you guys here are already screwed. But hey, heavy is the head that wears the crown, is it not? Hee. Instructor Ferdinand said with an evil chuckle, causing some geniuses to swallow. So, in summary, your Apex points are in your Apex watches, can be transferred and distributed to other students, and can be used to buy things from the Apex store. There are, of course, ways to increase your Apex points, but for now, you all will have to manage those points. When it's time to know how to increase your points, you will be informed. With that out of the way, let's talk about the third most important thing, and that is none other than your training classes. This is an academy, and of course, you all will undergo classes. Whatever your class will be for the day, and when your class begins, you will receive the notification in due time from your Apex watches. But of course, that building over there is where your classes and halls are. The man said as he pointed to a building, which seemed to be of a school-type design, sprawling several layers and incredibly long, taking up an entire portion of the academy floor. Not much will be said about your classes, but if I have to give you advice, it will be for you to obey every single thing that is sent to your watches. If you're told class begins at 6 o'clock in the morning, then get to your class at 5:30. Things like lateness are greatly frowned upon here, and punctuality will greet you with a pleasant surprise. The Ascension Academy doesn't just raise warriors. We raise disciplined warriors too. That out of it, let's see, rules? The most important rule of the academy is, never ever kill a student. While bullying might be allowed, killing is not. If you push a student to the brink and he dies, your punishment is death too. The man said this time with his voice cold and colorless. If 10 people gang up on a guy and he eventually dies, it is not the last person that delivered the death strike who will be killed in return. All 10 of you will be killed, along with those of you who bullied that kid, within 24 hours of the event. So, if you slap a genius on the head in the morning and laugh it off, and he ends up getting killed in the evening, rest assured you'll be a victim too, and you will get jailed if not killed in the end. So if I were you and I wanted to be safe, I'd avoid fighting any unnecessary fights and try finding points for myself if I need them without risking others' life. No matter how much point you try to obtain from a student, would it be worth it if you lose your life for it? Points can be regained, but what of life? The man warned, as those students who were already having dark thoughts instantly felt their hearts grow cold. Make much sense? Ryuk thought in his head. From the threats that the half-fallen one had told him about the balance of the world, if the Ascension Academy, the seeming pillar against these external forces, was rife with students bullying each other, creating flames of mistrust amongst everyone, then how the hell was the Academy even able to stand as the focal point against the incoming danger? To invoke such harsh punishments like death and jail terms for the geniuses for whatever damage they did to others of their own was a good way to force harmonious relationships, as the majority of the students would know better than to provoke others. Reckless actions could easily end with severe consequences that might lead to very heavy prices that even the pompous genius will find hard to pay. It was a law that Ryuk kind of loved, not like he'd ever be at the end of a bullying case. Second most important rule. While love is a given and kissing, holding hands, and whatever else is allowed, crossing the line with the opposite sex or the same sex is not allowed on campus. Both parties will be dealt with very harshly, Instructor Ferdinand announced, as the males chuckled among themselves. You're here to train, not make babies? Instructor Ferdinand added, his tone sharper, as the males smiled smugly amongst each other. The house of a student is their privacy. Also, if you're reported for staying in another student's dorm room without an invitation, you can be reported and punished. If you have a problem with them, wait for them to step out of their dorm. If you follow a student into their room, you will be punished. And that punishment will double if the person you follow into their room is of the opposite sex, irrespective of what you do inside. Even if all you did was simply stare at them all night, you will still be punished if they report you for entering without their permission. Getting your little ding-dong cut off could potentially be one of the punishments. The man warned, and this time, it was the male's turn to fall silent, while the females giggled louder. The same is true for the women too, though, Instructor Ferdinand said with authority, giving a glance at the females, whose smiles slowly faded. It's like there is no distinction between males and females here, a female Naga said with a huff, as Instructor Ferdinand nodded. Correct. Just as you may have noticed, the Academy does not distinguish between males and females. It sees everyone as students and respects their privacy equally. Just because you're female doesn't mean you can't get bullied. Bullying is still a thing and sexual harassment is a thing. But the Academy is a good judge of that. And just so you know, your watch is embedded with a tracker that knows your location at all times. In an investigation, we can simply pull out the records of where you've been and stayed for any given time frame. And while there are no visible cameras around, there are advanced surveillance technologies in every nook and cranny of the Academy. These will scan activities and trigger an alarm on your watch if it senses that you've committed a crime or broken a rule of the Academy. For those of you who think you can outsmart the school rules with your cleverness, well, we'll see if your brains are good enough to surpass the years of technological advancement and innovation that went into creating the Ascension Academy. Backed by billions of star coins, Instructor Ferdinand warned. In short, be a good person and have basic manners. We all know that killing a genius for his points is wrong, as that stems from greed and is called stealing, a bad action. Bullying others for fun is wrong. Skipping class is wrong. Coming late is a bad habit. In short, we all have brains. You all know what is good or bad. The Academy doesn't want you getting comfortable doing bad things and getting away with it. So, keep your actions at a minimum. You all came to the Ascension Academy to train. Do that and be done with it. Don't cause trouble, and don't cause unnecessary deaths. Hopefully, you all are mature enough to understand that. And lastly, there is a grade for students known as outer and inner students. The outer students can help the inner students perform menial jobs. When you get to your dorm rooms, you'll find the name and number of your assigned outer student, and you can summon them to help with tasks like washing your uniforms, ironing them, cleaning your rooms, and so on. Know this. The outer students are not your personal slaves. They are the school's property. If harm comes upon them, you will be punished. Of course, there is always the option to not want an outer student. If you think you can handle all your duties by yourself, you can opt out. Some of you value your privacy and may choose to cancel the arrangement. If so, your helper will have no access to your dorm at any time, the man concluded, as Ryuk's eyes flashed. So it's true. If I had really come to the Ascension Academy directly, I would have become an outer student, more of a slave for these geniuses. I really made the right choice by not agreeing then, he thought to himself, unconsciously clenching his hands. To be helping people like this, watching their clothes, cleaning, and ironing their uniforms. Ryuk couldn't imagine it. It disgusted his soul. That said, there are a couple of buildings around the newcomers area that are shared with the second years. One of these places is called Lovebud, which has a scenic view with waterfalls, gentle breezes, and abundant mana. It is a place to take a fresh breath of air. However, there are rules within it. One I can remember is never activating a skill or using mana there or something. Whatever, you can check that out yourself if you're curious. These places are where you can meet second years and third years since they also have access to it. I forgot to mention, the Apex store is also shared with the second and third years. Be careful to show respect to them. The cafeteria is also shared with the second and third years, but you'll barely see them there anyway. My ultimate advice would be to never get too close to those second years and third year students. There's a loophole in their law that permits them to kill you and get away with only a slap on the back of their hands. What? All of the geniuses roared in shock when they heard what Instructor Ferdinand said. There is a way for the second-year geniuses to kill the first years and merely get a pat on the back as punishment. Yes, there actually is, though it's stupid for the second years to kill you. Your 1,500 points are trash to them anyway, and most of them already have their own problems and thoughts. Unless you really step on their nerves, they would ignore you. Especially you top 10 family geniuses. You guys also have people from your race among the second years, and if you're killed, your family's second years will stand up for you, and that will cause chaos. Chaos is very much fatal in the second-year area, so the second years don't want to have anything to do with you. Their pride won't allow them to. Just be humble and keep your distance. You'll be fine, the man said, and by the way he spoke, it wasn't really such a serious thing like they all had thought. Well, I think that's all. Of course, you must wear your school uniform to classes. Your uniforms are already in your rooms. Both male and female students wear the same design, and the uniform is adjustable on the body. So for those of you who are exceptionally short or tall, you don't need to worry. And also, you are free to wear your normal clothes around the academy, but in classes, you are forbidden from doing so. There might be some things that I didn't remember to mention, but everything you need, including the rules of the academy and modes of preparation, the relationship between first, second, and third years, is already on your watches. Just get some free time and browse through your watch. 10 minutes of reading the rules can save you many headaches in the long run. So don't forget to do that. That said, this is the end of our little tour. I'll be dropping you at the front of your dorm buildings. For now, you all can waltz around the academy structures until you receive the first announcement from your Apex watches. And don't forget to stay away from the second-year academy gate, Instructor Ferdinand said as his flying mat zoomed forward toward the dorm building. The students all began dropping off one by one. Good luck, the man said with a happy wave before instantly zooming off into the distance with his mat. The 100 fallen family geniuses entered the gigantic structure where there were already elevators, and a few students could be seen walking around in twos and threes, discussing amongst each other. It seemed they weren't the earliest newcomers to arrive here. Ryuk walked to an elevator at the side and entered it, clicking on number 9 on the dashboard. But before the door closed, he found a person opposite his line of sight. It was none other than the avian race guy who was part of the top 10. Standing in front of the glass structure and looking at Ryuk with a raised eyebrow as he disappeared into thin air. Ryuk finally noticed. Damn it! I should have used a teleporter and just saved myself the stress. He mused to himself as the elevator door shut. With a loud ding, Ryuk was whisked upward. In the end, only after 7 minutes did the elevator finally open. Ryuk appeared before a small door that had number 10 on its front. Placing his hands on the doorknob, a deep light flashed from the door, and his watch also flashed with a clear blue color before the door opened up, and Ryuk stepped in. Immediately, as he did, all of Ryuk's pores instantly opened up as he took an incredibly deep breath, and a notification suddenly appeared. Mana. +1. Mana. +1. Mana. +1. The mana quantity is simply out of this world. Ryuk mused softly as he stepped into the living room. In front of him was a room with an otherworldly design of pure, sparkling, clean white colors. A circular sitting sofa, a pure white crystalline-looking glass, a large TV set, some flowers by the side, and a couple of other living room items filled the space. What was most eye-catching was none other than the wall window at the end of the room. It wasn't just a window, it was an entire wall of glass, which acted as a way for Ryuk to see the entire Ascension Academy building from a vantage point, allowing him access to an incredibly beautiful sight. This is insane for a student, Ryuk mused under his breath as his eyes took in the distant skyscraper, wondering just how much would be required just to pull all of this off. There was a door at the side which he entered. The first thing he sighted was an incredibly big bed at the center of the bedroom. It was so big it would take 7 Ryuks sleeping side by side with zero problems. Well-made, soft-looking, with an equally gigantic white-colored wardrobe at the side. There was a mini student desk along with a shelf with the neatest of tree branches all over the wall, exuding an elegant design. The lights in the room were dim white, making one's mood relaxed, and Ryuk couldn't say why, but he suddenly felt instantly sleepy. Still, he forced it down and turned to the door at the side, where a room with a deep pool could be seen. But it wasn't an ordinary pool. The mana here was 10 times more abundant than the mana that was present in Ryuk's living room. There is even a cultivating room. That makes sense. Instructor Ferdinand never mentioned the existence of a special cultivation room, so I guess the cultivation room is in every student's dorm room. The mana here was also twice as abundant as the one he had used to break through in the half-fallen castle. revealing just how great the concentration of mana in the place was. Everything around Ryuk reeked of money and luxuriousness, and it made him wonder if he truly deserved this just because he passed some test and became a top 10. Host's standard of living has been vastly improved. Nice. The system stated as Ryuk grinned. Truly nice.